It was a dense, starless night in the Nevada desert. Route 50, sadly known as the loneliest road in America, stretched out before Joe, a seasoned trucker with over 2 decades of asphalt under his tires. The radio, a longtime companion, now delivered only a monotonous hiss, without a signal, echoing the emptiness of the landscape. The only light piercing the darkness was the powerful beam from his massive Freightliner's headlights. Jobo, a man in his early 40s, with a face weathered by the sun and life on the road, had seen it all. But what appeared at the roadside, out of nowhere, made him lightly press the brake. A woman, dressed in a white that was almost phosphorescent under the headlights, stood there, thumb outstretched in an almost ethereal gesture. It was a disturbing sight in that isolation, he pondered. His mind told him to drive on. After all, the desert held its own mysteries and dangers. But the old code of the road, the one that said a trucker never left anyone stranded, spoke louder. He stopped the truck, the air brakes hissing into the night. The woman walked to the passenger door with a strange grace, almost as if gliding. She didn't make eye contact as she got in, settling into the seat with a delicacy that contrasted with the cab's rugged interior. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice so low it was barely audible over the truck's engine. I just need to get to the next town." Joe nodded, shifted into gear, and resumed the journey. "Name's Joe," he said, trying to break the ice. "Nice to meet you. What's yours?" She took a moment to answer, her eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. "Eliza," she said, her voice still a whisper. He tried to make conversation, commenting on the weather, the desolate landscape, the long hours on the road. Eliza responded with monosyllables or remained silent, a quietness that grew heavier with each passing mile. The air inside the cab began to feel strangely cold, even with the heater on full blast, and Joe felt an uncomfortable shiver down his spine. He tried to convince himself it was just the fatigue from the long drive. The miles stretched on, and the desert's darkness seemed to deepen. Joe cast furtive glances at the woman beside him. He started to notice strange things. She didn't blink. Her eyes, a light and undefined shade, remained open, reflecting the dashboard light in a disturbing way. And her face, it was too pale, almost translucent. Her thin, colorless lips seemed lifeless. He tried to ignore it, attributing everything to extreme tiredness and the dim lighting. My imagination, he thought, but the feeling that something was terribly wrong only grew stronger. He caught a subtle, almost imperceptible scent, like wet earth or something that had been buried. The hairs on his arm stood on end. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. Finally, the sign for the next town, Silver Peak, Pop, Serratus Limo, appeared under the headlights. Joe felt immense relief. He looked to his side to tell Eliza they were arriving. The passenger seat was empty. Joe's heart pounded. He slammed on the brakes with all his might, the truck squealing and swaying violently before coming to a halt in the middle of the road. He looked behind him, to the sides, in the rearview mirror. Nothing. There wasn't a living soul in sight. In the dark desert, fog began to rise from the ground, spreading like a ghostly veil. He swallowed hard, feeling cold sweat trickle down his forehead. The silence that followed the abrupt stop was more terrifying than the engine's roar. With trembling hands, he sped towards Silver Peak, his tires singing on the wet asphalt. He parked his truck at a dilapidated gas station, an oasis of light and life in the middle of nowhere. Still shaking, he entered the convenience store, where an elderly attendant, spectacles perched on his nose and a grizzled mustache, watched him with curiosity. "Trouble on the road, friend?" the attendant asked, His voice hoarse. Jobo, pale, could barely speak. I picked up a hitchhiker, a woman, and she. She disappeared. The attendant looked at him with an air of familiarity and sadness in his eyes. He took off his glasses and cleaned them with a cloth. "Ah, you must have met the ghost bride," he said, his voice calm. "It happens now and then around here. Years ago, a terrible accident. A young woman died right on that stretch of road on her wedding day. She was on her way to the church, in her white dress. They say her spirit still tries to hitch a ride to find her groom in Silver Peak." He paused, fixing his eyes on Joe. "Some say she doesn't realize she's already ... moved on." Joe felt a shiver that ran through every inch of his body. He bought a strong coffee, but couldn't drink it. The taste of the story, the cold of the desert, and the gaze of the woman who didn't blink would be etched in his memory forever. He never picked up another hitchhiker on that road, and for many months afterward, Joe avoided driving at night, especially on solitary stretches, always glancing at the passenger seat, afraid to encounter the ghost bride's empty eyes again. Marcelo was a true blue trucker. He had the soul of the road in his blood, a courage bordering on recklessness, and a firm conviction that no urban legend could truly scare him. For years he had crisscrossed Brazil from end to end, his 540-horse Volvo FH being his second home. He knew every treacherous curve, every dusty shortcut, and every macabre story that spread through roadside truck stops. One of these legends was that of the shadow truck, a phantom vehicle that, they said, appeared only on nights of dense fog, emitting not a single light, and pursued truckers until they lost control and, usually, their lives. Marcelo always scoffed at these stories. To him, they were fairy tales to frighten the rookies, until one particularly damp winter night in the Gaucho Mountains. Rain beat relentlessly on the windshield, and the fog was so dense he could barely distinguish the tip of his own hood. The cab lights, usually so comforting, seemed to be swallowed by the impenetrable darkness outside. The road, normally a familiar labyrinth, transformed into an endless, featureless tunnel. That's when he saw it. In the central rearview mirror, a shape even darker than the night. A massive silhouette with no taillights, no signaling, simply appeared out of nowhere. Marcelo felt an instant shiver, but his initial instinct was annoyance. Some lunatic with no taillights, he muttered to himself. He pressed a little harder on the accelerator, his heart beginning to beat at a different rhythm. The shadow truck, however, seemed to move effortlessly. It neither decreased nor increased its distance, constantly keeping a few meters behind Marcelo, a ghostly presence that defied logic. Marcelo tried to shake it off. He increased his speed to the safe limit of that winding stretch, braked sharply, took tighter turns than necessary. But the shadow followed him relentlessly, like a hungry predator. The silence inside the cab became suffocating, broken only by the muffled roar of the Volvo's engine and Marcelo's ragged breathing. He was sweating cold, even with the frigid mountain air invading the cab. An icy shiver ran down his spine when he noticed something even more disturbing. The shadow truck had no tires, or, if it did, they didn't touch the ground. The dark mass seemed to glide, to float over the wet asphalt, without noise, without friction. And most terrifying of all, every time he glanced in the rearview mirror, the figure seemed to draw a little closer, as if it was devouring the distance between them, its forms becoming more defined, more menacing. Marcelo's dashboard started to go haywire. Warning lights flashed on for no apparent reason. Oil pressure, engine temperature, Brake failure. The radio, which had been off, turned on by itself. It emitted only piercing static, and amidst the white noise, a distorted, guttural voice that seemed to whisper his name. Maarcee. Low. ... Panic set in. Marcelo felt despair engulf him. He wasn't fighting another truck, or even an irresponsible driver. He was being hunted by something that shouldn't exist. With one last effort, he slammed his foot down on the accelerator, his eyes fixed on the fog, praying for the day to break, for that apparition to vanish as quickly as it had appeared. When the first faint light of the sun began to pierce the fog, painting the horizon with pale shades of grey and pink, the shadow truck simply vanished. As if it had never been there, there was no sound, no trace. Just the emptiness where moments before a terrifying presence had loomed. Marcelo arrived at his final destination in Porto Alegre pale, exhausted and trembling. He barely managed to unload the merchandise. That day, he sold his beloved Volvo. The legends of the road, once a source of amusement, were now a terrifying truth in his mind. Since then, Marcelo no longer drives at night, and the fear of the shadow truck has become a permanent shadow in his life, a chilling reminder that the road, at times, holds secrets best left undiscovered. Have you ever heard of Route 113? Not many people have. It doesn't show up on Google Maps, and there's no cell signal for miles. It's a forgotten road in the interior of southern Brazil, surrounded by dense forest, constant fog, and a silence that weighs heavy in the air. But old truckers know, those who pass through there in the dead of night rarely come back the same. This is the story of Morrow, a veteran trucker, one of those who chain-smoked and talked more to his truck than to people. He'd worked his whole life on the road, facing potholes, robberies, police checkpoints, and even haunted truck stops. As he used to say, nothing fazed him. Until he accepted a freight nobody else would take. That night, Morrow was in a truck stop yard, drinking bitter coffee and watching the fine rain fall. A strange man appeared, tall, too thin, wearing a dusty black suit. His voice sounded choked, as if he spoke with stones in his throat. "I have a load to deliver. Payment up front. But there are conditions. ... Double quotes. Morrow chuckled. Conditions? Do you think I'm an Uber driver? Just tell me. The man extended a thick envelope of money and 3 instructions written on yellow paper. Do not open the cargo bay. Do not stop the truck for any reason. After 2 a.m., do not look in the rearview mirrors. But Morrow became serious. He thought it was some kind of joke or prank. But the money was real. Very real. He accepted. At 11:45 p.m., he left the truck stop with the loaded truck. The cargo bay was sealed with thick chains and rusted padlocks. There was no invoice, no identification for the cargo, just a smell. A strange odor, both sweet and rotten, that leaked through the cracks. Route 113 was indeed, as they said, deserted, without signs, with uneven asphalt. The fog seemed to swallow everything in front of the headlights, and the radio, which he usually kept on, only crackled. Morrow found it odd, but kept going. The money was too good to worry about superstition. At 1:47 a.m., he heard the first thump. A dry bang coming from inside the cargo bay, then another, and another, as if something was moving in there. He ignored it. 20 more minutes, and the noise increased. Now they were scratches, long, persistent, like claws trying to get out. Morrow turned the stereo up to maximum volume, tried to sing, to think about something else. But it was no use. At 2:03 a.m., he made the mistake. On instinct, he looked in the rearview mirror, and he saw, not his reflection, but a face. Still, with completely black eyes, no nose, no mouth, just two dark holes that seemed to suck in the light. The being was inside the cab. Behind him, he turned around instinctively, his heart pounding. But there was no one there. He looked in the mirror again. The face was smiling now, a huge smile, torn to the side of its head, as if it had been forcibly carved with a knife. Morrow screamed, wrenched the steering wheel, almost drove off the road. The truck swayed, but stayed on course. He tried to break the mirrors, threw his jacket over them, but it was no use. Whenever he looked forward, he saw the eyes in the corner of the windshield, always there, smiling. At 3:19 a.m., the GPS turned off by itself. The dashboard lights flickered, the engine sputtered, and the cargo bay ... was now bulging. As if something much larger than the truck was trying to get out, Morrow floored it. He was crying, yelling at God, pleading for help. The last transmission the central radio picked up was him saying, "I shouldn't have looked, he's here, he's driving now." Then, silence. Days later, the truck was found abandoned in the middle of nowhere. The engine still warm. The cargo bay ... empty. But inside, completely scratched. As if sharp claws had been used for hours. No sign of Morrow. Only one thing bothered the investigators. The rearview mirror. It was intact, but it reflected a smiling face that wasn't Morrow's.